Hello, Goshen Theater Drama Club members, friends, and fans. Welcome to episode 13, dun dun dun, of Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks. Joining us today are Paul Regano, straight from the NYC, Miss Katie Barnes, straight from somewhere in Michigan.
Yeah, Three Rivers.
And coming at you old school, which is something somebody says sometimes, from Goshen, is Miss Molly Hill. Welcome, everybody. How are we doing today?
We're doing well.
Right.
I thought everyone was going to talk at the same time, and then it was just me.
You represented well, though, Molly.
Thank
It
you.
was a good choice.
I wish I felt as good as Molly looks. How's that?
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
wow. Paul.
That is like a pickup line, Paul Regano.
I mean, like she's like excited and vivacious.
Oh, thanks.
But you're lovely too, Molly. But that does not define you as a person.
Thank
or
you.
True.
Your value.
Very good. So if this is your first time tuning in, the format of Drama Club Table Talks, we tackle one topic every week. We start with your questions. And usually at the end of the episode, we talk about what we're going to be doing the next week. So that'll be something exciting. Today's episode theme is Broadway disasters because it's our 13th episode of Drama Club Table Talks. So to stave off the bad luck, we've decided to just address the elephant in the room and talk about Broadway disasters. We're going to start with a question today. And this one came from our Facebook and is a question for the whole panel. This question is, what is your favorite unpopular Broadway musical? Yeah, I think, Paul, we're going to start with you. What do you think? Your favorite unpopular show? Hot takes.
I get this. I see this question a lot in like Facebook circles that I'm in, and I think unpopular is like very subjective. But I'm gonna go with Big the musical, which
I love Big.
Big is beautiful. I love it with all its warts. It's based on the Tom Hanks film about a 13-year-old kid who is not growing up as fast as he wants, and he wishes on a Zoltar machine, a arcade machine at a fair, to be big. And the next day he wakes up as Tom Hanks, which I think is a nice, great trade up. But he's now this 13-year-old kid in an adult body trying to navigate the world, and it came to Broadway in the late 90s, early 2000s. It starred Daniel Jenkins, who was the original Huck Finn in Big River. So like, what a great choice. And he was fantastic in it. And Barbara Walsh, if you know that name, an amazing, fun show with a lot of issues and problems. Did not do incredibly well. But then when it went out on the road, they rewrote a lot of stuff. And don't worry, all the stuff that was working on Broadway, they fixed it and made it not work on the road. I shouldn't say this in a public forum. I don't agree with the changes that were made for the tour. I think that there were things that could have been fixed, but that wasn't one of them. Those things were not the things that had the problems. And I think that the show in general is overlooked, and it's cute, and it's got a lot of heart and a lot of great music. Check it out.
I love that. Miss Katie, what's your favorite unpopular show?
I don't know that it's necessarily unpopular, but I don't think it's widely known necessarily. And it's I Love You Because.
Oh, I love that show.
I love that show. It was actually the first production I saw performed at my college my freshman year, and it was like the first time that I knew I'd made the right choice in being there. The cast was so exceptionally talented, and I just loved everything about it. And it's loosely based on Pride and Prejudice, which is one of my favorite novels by Jane Austen. So it's set in New York, and it's crazy, and it's got these heightened characters that I adore, and the music's just fun. I still sing to the soundtrack to this day. It's on my playlist. So I would say I Love You Because.
There's good stuff for your book, and I Love You Because, too. Like, there's some not often sung audition songs that pack a punch.
Yep.
Yeah,
Especially Gentlemen. There's a couple of good
Yes.
ones for you, Gentlemen.
it's hard music too, but not something like a Sondheim or a Jason Robert Brown that your audition accompanist will be like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing.
It has that very early 2000s like that. That's the early 2000s of musical theater. That's what it all sounds like.
Lots of 5 chords and 2 chords.
Yes, with a chunk, 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 chunk in the left hand.
Yes, that's exactly the rhythm. Yeah. So it shows off that you can do difficult material without putting a huge strain on your accompanist.
I love that. Molly, what's your hot take?
Ooh, so the one that I thought of, and I'm actually not sure how popular this was on Broadway. Maybe it was pretty popular, but I love The Sweet Smell of Success. The score is gorgeous. That's Marvin Hamlish, right? That score? Yeah. It's just some of the best music that I've heard in Broadway show. Original cast had Brian Darcy James and Kelly O'Hara. They were just amazing voices. I've actually never seen it on stage, but I've sung from the show quite a bit, and I've listened to it quite a bit, and I saw the movie that it's based on. So yeah, it's pretty jazzy. I'm not sure like what else to say about it, I guess. It's just really, really catchy. I think that they did a really good job telling the story through music.
That's awesome.
To respond, Molly, you're right. It was not particularly well received in its original run on Broadway, and that's not because it's not good. Because you're right, it's very well written, and it has a lot of stuff to its credit. But I don't know, like, is it too soon to start talking about like the flops and the reasons and the things?
You can sure do that. I have my hot take, but
do your hot take.
Mine's an off-Broadway show, and the reason I love it is because I identify with it so much, and I've actually met the author on several occasions, and it's Cowgirls. It's a show that's never produced, and there's Ryan. Say hello. He's having cereal, I think. Is it cereal? Oh, look, that's the almond milk. So, yep. So Cowgirls,
just like us.
Celebrities, they're just like us. Cowgirls is about a classical string trio who knew each other in college, who do a last reunion tour, and they decide to play all these different venues, and they're running out of money because they were not wildly popular, and they have to have like a sellout show for their last show in order to get their tickets home. That's the concept. They accidentally get booked into a honky-tonk bar that is on the brink of foreclosure. So the honky-tonk bar and the trio both need to have enough ticket sales in order for the mortgage to get paid and for them to get their ticket home. So the bar owner decides to teach this trio of musicians to play bluegrass in 3 days. So it's about the expectation of what bluegrass and country music is about versus what classical musicians think it is, how you translate those skills from one to the other. And Mary Murfitt, the woman who wrote it with herself in mind. She plays the violinist in the show. And I think the reason it's not produced is because you need a female pianist who can play classical music very well, but who can also play in the ragtime style. She has a solo called Honky Tonk Girl that is a ragtime song that she sings and plays at the same time, that has the A minor piano concerto, like it's got that in it, as well as being like a ragtime number. She sings about like playing like Van Cliburn. She does the dee 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 dee. So she's playing all of these classical pieces and a ragtime piece at the same time. So you've got to have her. And they all play a bunch of stuff through the whole show. She's also got to be charismatic. Then you need a cellist who is an extremely good country singer and guitarist, like almost a better guitarist than cellist. In the original Broadway show, they had trouble casting this role. So they cast a folk musician, singer, songwriter, and they put fake frets on the cello and tuned the cello like a guitar and taught her to do the bow hold so that she could play the cello Uh, yeah.
Incredible.
So there's her. Then the bar owner obviously has to be an incredible country musician. Then there's two waitresses, one who plays banjo and the other who plays auxiliary percussion, but she has to be able to play auxiliary percussion extremely well because she's playing on found objects and then on some instruments. And basically everybody plays instruments, but the violinist is the kicker because she needs to play accordion, violin, and fiddle, and she has to be able to play the Heifetz cadenza from the G major Mozart violin concerto as part of a song. So like it's murder. So that she's got to be able to do that. She has to play the piano as well, plus guitar, plus banjo, plus mandolin. So these are impossible to cast roles, and they all have this journey. And the undercurrent of the whole thing is feminism. So it's about why, like, the violinist woman wanted to be a conductor and was told she couldn't be a conductor because she's a woman, and like that the hurdles that she would have to jump over were too great for her. And like there's that, and like what it's like one of the characters is like largely pregnant during the show, and like how she's being underestimated by her partner because there's an assumption that she is supposed to be the domestic person in this interaction, and she has dreams that she wants to achieve, but she's not allowed because she's supposed to be a mom. You're supposed to put your dreams in your kids. So there's this whole thing. The owner of the bar is the daughter and heir of the person who was successful at owning the bar, who was a man. So there's this whole undercurrent of feminism in the show. I've talked about it a lot. No one ever produces it. It's a dream show of mine. But yeah, hot take. Maybe not a hot take. It's just a really good off-Broadway show.
It's a hot take.
Yeah.
Are there any roles for girls who play the bassoon?
There could be. If I, like, honestly, I feel like it's produced so seldom now, I don't even know where I would go to get the rights to it, one. And two, if I called around and tried to get in touch with the author, I bet I could chat with her about doing an adaptation that's a little more modern, maybe. And maybe at the Goshen Theater, who knows? There isn't a lot of ways to translate the bassoon into a guitar. You can't put fake frets on a bassoon. It doesn't.
Not a whole heck of a lot to do with a bassoon that isn't a bassoon. Register and it's almost an oboe. How's that?
Oh, I got on a Cowgirls tangent. Anybody who's known me for more than 10 years knows how much I love that show and has heard me talk about it and knows like I gave far too much detail, which is very like me. Welcome to Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks. So on that,
I was about to explain the socioeconomic reasons behind the flop of The Sweet Smell of Success. So like
let's go back to The Sweet Smell of Success. This will be a great warm-up into our greater topic, and I think Sweet Smell of Success might be on one of these lists that we're going to go through. I think it might be, sadly. Go ahead, Paul.
I also find it interesting, Molly, that you mentioned a couple of the heavy hitters that were in that cast, including Brian Darcy James and Kelly O'Hara, who at the time were not yet Brian Darcy James and Kelly O'Hara. But the name of that show was John Lithgow, who was not a small deal at the time. He was like coming right off his success of Third Rock from the Sun. If you haven't seen that television show from the 90s, go look it up. It's great. And the reason why in the early 2000s, I think we saw a shift in the musicals. If you look at I got to go all the way back to the 80s to explain this. When the mega musicals came in the 80s and Americans were like, wow, look at the spectacle. It's incredible. But the shows were like Les Miserables. The shows were Miss Saigon. And we started saying like, we can really tackle more difficult subject matter. I think that it was one of the first times, at least in the mainstream, that audiences started to say we can take musicals seriously. And by the end of the 80s, American audiences were kind of saying like, oh, we're done with the British thing. No offense, Brits, but we made the art form. And American writers were like, no, yeah, we can give you what you're talking about. We can make these darker musicals. We can do the big spectacle. Hal Prince was like, let's go. Let's do Kiss of the Spider Woman. And you got Kiss of the Spider Woman, and you got Grand Hotel, and you got a lot of shows through the early 90s where we started talking about things that were a little more serious. And I think that kind of came to it. And we started pushing the limits of the art form in a lot of ways. And that's how we ended up with a little show that no one really thought was going to go super far and then kind of blew up, called Rent. And no matter what you think of Rent, it completely changed the musical theater landscape, introducing a sound that had been like trying to break into musicals for a little while. And Jonathan Larson really just blew it up and really brought it into the mainstream. We were talking about really dark subject matter and things that were not immediately relevant anymore because he had been workshopping it for several years, but still very relevant and very real. And things continued in that direction for a little while. And then in late 2001 in New York City, things changed dramatically. And people didn't want to go to the theater and be made to think and be faced with dark subject matter. And suddenly shows that tackled more difficult and thought-provoking things like Urinetown, like Reefer Madness, as funny and fun as it is, like Sweet Smell of Success, were not doing as well. And Thoroughly Modern Millie won the Tony that year instead of Urinetown. And then we eventually got to Legally Blonde and The Wedding Singer, Good Vibrations, and All Shook Up, which are fine shows in their own right, but we were not, we kind of curbed the trajectory of the we're going to tackle serious subject matter, like yellow journalism.
So, like, if you're the foster parents, what are you cheering for to win at that Tony Awards? Are you going with Thoroughly Modern Millie, or are you going with Urinetown?
Literally the last name Foster, not foster parents, but
not foster parents.
I was also very confused.
Yeah.
I was like, what is this analogy you're trying to get at, Miss Amber?
No, Urinetown took book and score, so you know.
Urinetown is one of my favorite shows ever in the world. Little Sally is one of my favorite roles I've ever played. I could play just that role for the rest of my life and be happy and fulfilled. So
you probably literally could play that role for the rest of your life.
Not wrong.
And it just wouldn't just make you happy. Like, you probably literally could just do that.
Yeah, I could probably just find theaters doing Urinetown and
you should see if the website yourlittlesally.com is taken, and then just market an entire website.
That would be so cool. I always get so many ideas during these table talks.
The woman who originated that role had done it in every previous iteration, from the Fringe Festival right up to Broadway, and I think by the time they opened, she was like 40. So yeah, you got lots of Little Sally years ahead of you.
Yeah. I told Ryan that he should get the website lurchforyou.com. Just market himself as like the imminent Lurch in Addams Family.
Yes.
But I'm sure that URL is taken. So I know we've warmed up into it, but today's topic is Broadway flops. Like, what went wrong? Why did it go wrong? What happened? We're going to talk a little bit about like the worst Broadway musicals ever. Yay! And then we're going to talk about, there are 22 shows that ran on Broadway that ran for one night. And it, like, this is just one of the lists that I found. So this is not necessarily 100% accurate, but we'll see. We'll see if there's any that we know that are supposed to be on the list that aren't there. Because there could be more. This is something that used to happen a lot more than it happens now, because initial investment in musicals used to be much smaller. People now have to have like helicopters and giant gorillas and glitter cannons for people to come see a show. So they used to have people singing in order for people to buy tickets. So yes, we're going to go through all of that stuff, chat about it a little bit, and talk about some of the reasons that failures get financed. Why do they fail? What happened? And I think as we go through the list of the worst Broadway musicals ever, we can sort of address that stuff. Where are we going to start? What do you think? Let's start with, oh, you know, I also wanted to talk about 2016, the year of the Broadway flop. We'll talk about that as well. So let's start with, this may or may not be a hot take, worst Broadway musicals of all time, number 9, Carrie, the musical. So
never seen it, want to see it. I'm a horror movie fan, so I'm very interested, but I've never actually seen it.
I agree with Katie. My alma mater is doing it this year, hopefully with COVID, I don't know. But yes.
Yeah, there is a number about killing the pig.
Now,
What?
Now what was it, 2012, I think?
Yeah.
They did a Broadway revival where they rewrote a lot of it. And I think one of the things, and if you look at the New York Times review, I think it was Frank Rich at that time, one of the things that they talk about a lot, I mean, like, there's an entire book about Broadway flops, and it's called Not Since Carrie. Like, it is the poster child, right? One of the things that made it so painful was that there were things in it that really worked, that were like correct musical theater writing and told the story. And then you got something like oh, what's that song that all the kids sang that was rewritten in the 2012 rewrite? The one about the high school hierarchy, and I cannot
I don't remember
because I don't know the show that well, because I'm not my brother. I don't know. He loves the show. I'm not crazy about it. But the fact that you were on this roller coaster of like, oh, this kind of works, and then that was what really doomed the show, according to historical sources.
Yeah. I think the topic matter also is difficult. Like there is a lot to be said for a lot of these Broadway failures. Some of the like ran one night things. A lot of these failures are musicals that have gore in them. So I think that's something to be considered. There is something like, people are fine watching a gory or horrifying movie. Like, think of a vampire musical that was successful.
Well, I was going to say Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the musical episode, but once again, that's on screen, so
Right.
It doesn't count.
And it had a built-in audience.
Yes.
Yes. It was far into it.
If that was the pilot, imagine.
Right.
My 7-year-old little self would have been so excited, though.
You would have been the only one. So let's talk about a show that ran for a little bit longer. It ran for a couple years, opened in 2011, closed in 2014, but is still considered a flop because it did not make its investors' money back.
2011? I think I know what you're talking about.
It is Spider-Man, Turn Off the Dark. There was a $75 initial investment. $75 million.
Oh, million. I was like, that's nothing.
I was like, no wonder the technical stuff didn't work.
Sorry.
It broke the record for largest initial investment, right?
Yes. Yeah, no one's ever put more than that. Quite rightly. Any amount of money that's like 7 times the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes on one event, that's too much. That's too much money. But it ran for 3 years, failed to recoup its initial investment.
It was incredibly ambitious, though. And I think that Julie Taymor is someone who has really, really ambitious and expensive ideas. And when it was Disney's money in 1998, I mean, sure.
Right.
But even, and Lion King, and they could afford it because it was wildly popular.
Yeah.
Lion King, I think a year after it opened, 2 years after it opened, revamped all the costume designs to make them safer for the actors because people were getting injured.
It was the second show on Broadway to have an on-staff physical therapist. First show on Broadway to have an on-staff physical therapist?
Chorus Line.
Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, that makes sense.
Of course.
Because the plates would fall down all the time.
I consider myself so lucky that I got to see the original design and the reduced.
I saw the out-of-town tryout of Lion King in Minneapolis.
Wow.
Yeah. And I thought when I saw it later that everything had been much larger when I saw it in Minneapolis. And I thought, gosh, you know what? This must be the rose-colored glasses of youth. Like, because I recalled things being much grander. And in particular, the way that they did the Stampede, which failed in the out-of-town tryout, the way that they did the Stampede, they had to stop the show to set it up. They said, ladies and gentlemen, please stay in your seats. And like the curtain closes, and you hear that for about 5 minutes and then it starts. But it was like the way that they do it now is neat, but it was bigger than that, and the thing moved. So there was like, if you guys were watching it on stage, it was profile and then it went upstage like that, and it was coming toward you. Yeah, it was neat, but like the thing started failing even while they were doing it, and even though they had to set it up. So yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy this 5-minute intermission before the Act 1 finale, followed by a 10-minute intermission.
Please don't get up. They expressly said, please don't leave your seats. But yeah, that was a huge initial investment, and then it was revamped. And like, if like it's been running, it's been on tour, and it's been forever. So now it's old hat, and it's kind of affected the way that musicals happen, and it's spectacular. But Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark failed to meet those same matrices. And some of the stuff they try to do is so spectacular, like some of the flying effects stuff where like Spider-Man lands in the audience. Crazy.
Apparently they used the same technology as the cameras in the NFL that float over the field, over the stage in the stadium.
Football stage.
The football stage that float over the field that are suspended from the seats. And so they installed those in not the St. James.
I don't remember. Let me look. I might have the info right here.
So that Spider-Man and the Green Goblin.
Foxwoods
Theater, right? Formerly the Ford?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And okay, that's also really interesting because that theater is not a particularly small house, which means you have to sell more tickets to meet your
Minimums
6 or whatever minimums. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark is going to be a large spectacle-driven big show, so you want a space that's large enough. So it's not like you could have done that in the music box, but you don't have to sell as many tickets to fill that theater,
right?
And to make the money to pay rent and all that.
I think a small production of Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark actually might be interesting. Like maybe not necessarily a black box, but a black box would be interesting. Like think of the stuff that you could just do with Bungie in a small space.
Wow.
Nobody take that idea.
Amber's gonna use it. No, it was in previews before I went to New York for the very first time in college. And we were getting ready. I was a sophomore, but I was going up to watch the senior showcase and do some workshops that were set up for our classes and stuff. And I just remember we were all trying to decide what shows we wanted to see. And I had a group of friends who really wanted to go see Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. And I was just like, why? It fails like every night that you go. And they're like, no, I think it'll be great. We're going to go just to see the spectacle of it. I was like, yeah, no, I'm going to spend my money on a show that I want to see like once. And they went to that and I went to one. And sure enough, actor got stuck over the audience that night and they had to stop the show.
Wow.
Yeah. I think one of the things that it ran on was that morbid curiosity that like, am I going to see someone get stuck over the audience? Am I going to see someone get hurt? Or it's so bad, the no publicity is bad publicity, right? There is no such thing as bad publicity is what I was trying to say. That people were just going for the like the novelty of it. You have to see it. It's this terrible thing. And it ran for, like Amber said, 3 years. Although I think the first 2 were previews. That was another thing that they kept having to push back the opening, and they kept adding more previews to work out more kinks. And finally, the reviewers were like, we're going to see this thing. You keep pushing back opening. We're going to see it. We're going to review it. And maybe that wasn't fair of them. who can say? Hindsight is 2020.
Yep. So the next selection on our flops list isn't from 2020. It's 2015. This is Dr. Zhivago the musical. It failed to meet back its initial investment, just like all of the shows on this list. This one was a huge movie in, I think, 68, 69. It was in the 1960s. It might have been a little earlier than that. Huge movie. I remember it's like an epic set in Russia, and I think mostly in Siberia, and a huge epic romance. It was the English Patient of its time. I have no contemporary example that's like this. But it only ran for 23 performances on Broadway. And it was back in, did you see it, Paul, in 2015?
I did not.
The big complaint was that the music was too lush and the lyrics would get completely overwhelmed by the music, so no one understood what was happening. And the plot itself, the movie was 3.5 hours long. It was on like 3 VHS cassettes, I remember when I was a kid. Anything that's 3 VHS cassettes, don't try to adapt it into a musical. I think that's a good point.
Take
yeah.
the comment route and just do 7 pages of it, you know.
There you go. Perfect. Also, they used video in this, and it was largely distracting. And I think this is not necessarily early in the advent of using video projection, but you have to be careful with it. And I think people have gotten more subtle, using it as a replacement for backdrops instead of a way to animate the things that you're seeing. Like, I think probably the show that I've heard does projection the best is Anastasia. And it's interesting that Anastasia is set in the same location as Dr. Zhivago, and Anastasia did it right, and Dr. Zhivago did it very badly. But yeah, it only ran 23 performances, and you guys know, like, these are some theater insiders here, so you guys know how expensive it is to get projection, use projection, and design projection, especially on this level. So maybe that's part of the reason they never made back their investment. Any other theories?
I think, yeah, I think it goes hand in hand kind of with what you were saying about the, I think it's one of those instances where being recognizable worked to its disadvantage more than its advantage. The same way that Carrie did.
Yeah.
You know, there's certainly been a trend, I think, within the last 10, 15 years of seeing musicals with a title like something you'd never think would be a musical, The Musical, you know, Menopause, The Musical. No offense to Menopause. I've never seen it, but I'm sure it's lovely. But I think there's sort of an uncanny valley of that, where, you know, when it was The Wedding Singer, it was like, oh, I know that, I love that, it's so cute. When it's something like Dr. Zhivago that has such a huge mythos about it, in a way, I think that people immediately are going to assume, how can you translate that? I think that's one of the things that that hurt the Bridges of Madison County as well.
Yes, like where the landscape is a character. Like,
Yeah.
one of the enemies and villains of the piece is the Siberian winter. And if you haven't seen this movie, it is totally worth a watch, by the way. And when live entertainment is risky and seldom being produced, this is a great time to sit down and watch a 3.5-hour Russian epic. If you really want an epic, you could sit down and read the book. The book came out in 1957. It's by Boris Pasternak. Read that book. That's our book club selection for the first ever Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks book club. Dr. Zhivago. Maybe not.
I'm gonna be busy that day.
I'm making a dentist appointment for that day right now.
So the fourth musical on our list, this is one of my favorite ones, is Scandalous. It's a musical that came out in 2012. And this one, okay, so there's like a category of things go wrong for me. That's when people who like theater and musicals decide that it's easy to make one and they have the money to do it. And those shows are very seldom good. But Scandalous was written, the book and lyrics were written by Kathy Lee Gifford. Katie's face. But it's based on there was the life of an evangelical preacher in the 20s and 30s. Her name was Amy Semple McPherson. So it's based on the life of, are you writing things down, Katie? It's based on the life of Amy Semple McPherson. So it's about an evangelical preacher. The logo art is also to blame. It's like, it's very apple tree-esque. It's like a woman with red nails holding an apple with a bite taken out of it.
I thought that was great. This is why that's not my job. That's why I'm not a graphic designer.
But I think that is a great graphic. It tells you a lot about like what the source material is going to be, and it gives you the idea that maybe there's a little bit of Abrahamic religious content in there. So for some people, that's going to be good, and for some people that's going to be bad. But when you take that, okay, you have this Abrahamic religious thing, and it's also written and produced by Kathy Lee Gifford.
Funny. I mean, I really don't know this show well.
Nobody does.
I'll ask my mom next time I talk to her, because she saw it. She was invited and didn't have to pay, so she went and saw
it. Only ran for 30 performances.
Yeah, I think she saw it in previews.
Oh, okay.
Because I think, well, we're going to talk about that later. So,
tell her to host a watching party of the episode and like send us her corrections.
I like that.
Oh, that's a great idea.
But a show, so the guy who wrote the music for that show also wrote a show that just ran off Broadway a couple of years ago. It started at the York Theater and then transferred to New World Stages. It's called Desperate Measures, and it's a spaghetti Western adaptation of Measure for Measure. And it is so good.
Fun.
Delightful. And I remember opening my playbill when I saw it twice. I saw it at the York, and when it transferred, it was that good. I remember opening my playbill at the York and saying, David, whatever his name is, wrote this? Oh no, because the first thing I thought of was Scandalous. And then the show was brilliant.
See? It's not David, what's his name? Whose name I don't actually have down here on my list. But yeah, sometimes I think when someone's too close to a project and they don't get outside voices and they're producing it, like when you have a good idea, a producer will be found. And like, I think one of the things about like these lists of flops, if there's always a good song in every flop, because someone had to listen to it and go, I'm going to give you money. I'm writing you a check here. Like someone had to believe in it enough to pay for it. When the person who's writing it is also the person writing the check, that's when that layer of excellence gets taken away. So I think it's seldom that those are good shows. Let's see, what's next? Oh, this one, number 5 on our list, is from 2011. These are all pretty contemporary flops, I think, because the price of producing Broadway musicals is up, up, up. But this is from the famous, almost infamous writer of many things considered to be flops that have been in rewrites several times, Civil War, Jekyll and Hyde being among the 2 biggest examples. This is a show by Frank Wildhorn called Wonderland that came out in 2011. And like all Frank Wildhorn shows, the music is delightful. The songs are wonderful. They are great for your book. Have a ton of fun. They are wonderful, wonderful songs. This show closed after 33 performances and never recouped its initial investment.
But it did great in Florida.
Yes.
Wildhorn in Florida.
Oh, every Frank Wildhorn show does wildly, wonderfully well in Florida. Yeah.
And it gave us the brilliantly talented Kate Weatherhead. Is that the Kate that I'm thinking of?
Yes, I think so.
Who then later wowed us again in Legally Blonde as Vivian. No, it's not Kate Weatherhead. It's someone else. But she's brilliant, and I don't know why I
the list.
her name. And I think that was definitely a stepping stone for her. She was kind of like the takeaway from that show. She played the Mad Hatter.
So good. She's so good too.
I'm gonna look this up right now because it's gonna kill me.
I feel like, hot take, I feel like Frank Wildhorn is the like, who directed Beetlejuice? What's his name? Not Beetlejuice the musical. Who is that? Tim Burton. I feel like Frank Wildhorn is the Tim Burton of Broadway. Like, he gets really engaged with these odd steampunk narratives. But the difference is none of Frank Wildhorn's stuff takes, for whatever reason. Like, there's something about it that's mildly cringy. I don't know what that Frank Wildhorn thing is.
Kate Shindle, by the way.
Kate Shindle, former Miss America, by the way.
Did not know that.
Kate Shindle, president of Actors Equity Association, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Kate Shindle's delightful.
Yeah. Are we like delving into the Wildhorns now?
Like, let's not delve. Let's skim.
Sure.
Do you guys like, Molly, Katie, do you guys have a favorite Frank Wildhorn show? Do you know his body of work?
I've been in Civil War, and by been in Civil War, I mean I was in one song because I'm a woman.
There you go.
But it was, I mean, I liked the music a lot. I don't think I've been like very involved with any of his other works or like spent the time to really just sit down and listen and learn about it. So I feel like I'm kind of a fly on the wall learning in this conversation too. But yeah. I enjoyed my time in Civil War.
Yeah, I was in Civil War, but I played in the pit for Civil War. I played violin for the pit, and I love those orchestrations too.
Yes, I agree.
Wildly good.
Wildly.
Hey. I think the weird thing about, like, there's even some on the list, or some that didn't make that list, like Scarlet Pimpernel.
Oh, I've sung from that show too.
Of course, because the songs are so good.
Yeah, and Pimpernel is one that kind of like, I wouldn't call it a hit.
No.
It was a flop. It was just kind of like, we opened on Broadway, we closed on Broadway and rewrote, and opened again on Broadway, and then we toured, and then we like, there are like 7 different versions of it. I think it's a really good show. Each version has its own merits.
Right.
But at its core, I think it's actually a good show, and I think a lot of credit has to be given to the lyricist on that show, Nan Knighton. I think that those lyrics kind of elevated Wildhorn's writing as well.
Yeah, I agree. There's also Jekyll and Hyde, which has 7 versions, including a concept album. But
and
yeah,
film with David Hasselhoff.
It's true. The most famous use of coiffure in Broadway musical history. Katie, do you have a favorite Wildhorn song or Wildhorn musical?
So to be honest, I don't pay attention necessarily to names. So I'm like the least educated person to speak about any of his works because I just realized that he's done Jekyll and Hyde and stuff. So like, but I enjoy Jekyll and Hyde. What is that one song they sing? It's a woman singing someone
like you.
Yeah, Someone Like You. I like that song a lot.
I love that song. There's also a good turn in that song. Like, she's saying it's a love song that's not a love song. And I love those where it's like, hey, not you, obviously, but if someone that's like you could love somebody that's like me, then everything would be like that. It's so good because she's not saying, I wish you could love me, but these would be the circumstances if you did. It is if I loved you in the contemporary sphere. I love it. I love that song. I love you, Katie Barnes. This is the best conversation that's ever happened.
It's also brilliant in how you compare it to If I Loved You, because If I Loved You has a very deriding kind of tone to it that, oh yeah, especially if you listen to the verse, right?
Yeah.
Right. Kind of scrawny and pale, picking up my food and
Lovesick like any other guy.
and then
Meh.
yeah, if I loved you, this is how it would be. Whereas someone like you has this hopeful spirit to it.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the reason that Oscar Hammerstein is a genius, because those lyrics are subtly, you know, that they love each other, but that people that in their minds on the surface, people that love each other are beneath them for whatever reason. So they're talking about it from this lofty place of not loving each other because people who are in love are stupid. So obviously we're not stupid. But if I did, this is what it would like. There's so many, like a simple lyricist. I've heard that so many times. Well, Oscar Hammerstein is such a simple lyricist.
And I mean, if we're
I am but a simple human.
I mean, and if we're talking about that, Stephen Sondheim talks about why lyrics are different from poetry.
Yes.
In that in poetry, you can read it, you can look at it, you can hear it and then read it and think back on it and mull it over. Lyrics, especially in musical theater writing, have to be understood the first time they're heard. So you
Yes.
can't get overly symbolic or flowery, you will lose your audience. A, they'll eventually tune out, and B, they're not going to be able to hear, analyze, understand, look at the structure. They just have to hear what you're saying. And Oscar Hammerstein is able to do that in a way that does not put strain on the brain in terms of understanding what he's talking about.
Right. I am as
Still-
corny as Kansas in August.
Right. And you still are able to get subtext from it.
Yep.
Right.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Like that song. I'm in love, 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 I'm in love with a wonderful guy are the last 28 words or whatever of that song. But
what's
yeah,
great is like you go from that simple song to you have to be carefully taught in the same musical, and it's just mind-blowing.
but if you look too, there is, even in I'm as corny as Kansas in August, there is an undercurrent of nationalism which gives you the idea that this person, even though her motivations are coming from a relatable place, that she might have ideas that make her superior to other people because she's as corny as Kansas in August. We've got blueberry pie. We've got all of these things that are quintessentially white America that she's saying she's like levels. But also when people say, oh, stupid, simple lyrics, and they say, I am as corny as Kansas in August, they're not seeing all of those levels. This is this essential element that I think Frank Wildhorn, lacks. So he writes great individual songs.
Yeah.
But you can't say that in Scarlet Pimpernel or Jekyll and Hyde that there is, oh, when she sings Bring on the Men in Jekyll and Hyde, it connects over to Facade in this way. It doesn't. It doesn't. None of the songs connect from one thing to the other. None of them are telling you anything more deep about the story. And if you dig into Frank Wildhorn, you find out how good he is, Paul Regano, at leading tones. You find out how great he is at modulation and leading to modulation. Like when you dig in, you find out how good a pop songwriter he is and how good he is at structure and the orchestration side of things. That's what you get when you dig into him. When you dig into Rodgers and Hammerstein or you dig into Sondheim, you get so much more than that. There's more color and depth to it. So I think maybe that's why his shows should be good, but never quite take. It's part of it. We could write a dissertation on this, so we could do an entire episode on why Frank Wildhorn has never had a hit.
I'll provide the snacks. I'll be your support system.
Big bodies in it multiple times, and even that didn't do well. So like something's missing.
Yes. So the next, speaking of Frank Wildhorn musicals, the next musical on our list is not by Frank Wildhorn, but is a vampire musical because Frank Wildhorn also wrote Dracula. Hey, gothic through line there. This one also should have been a hit. Elton John did the music based on a wildly popular Anne Rice book. This is Lestat from 2006. It's 6th on our list. This one, I cannot honestly think of a vampire musical that did not fail. The music ended up being sort of uninspiring, and you think like Elton John and Anne Rice put together should be on fire. Both of them have such a gift with words for the lyrics to just lay flat. But this show died a death after 39 performances, and it opened and closed obviously in the same year. There is something about vampire musicals that just doesn't, like, Anne Rice brought the vampires back. Yeah. And way back in like 1980, whatever, 90, whatever, when she started writing Vampire Chronicles, she really was the person to have this vampire renaissance. People love vampires, and it's because of Anne Rice. And for this musical to die like this so quickly, what in the world happened? 2006, Lestat.
All I know is I Want More is my go-to audition song for almost everything I do.
Good songs.
Great song. And the opposite of I Love You, because that song is not very difficult to sing, but it sounds super difficult to sing.
Yeah, it's like right in that sweet spot, and then there's that key change, but like you're still not even singing that high, but you can just belt it out, and it's really comfortable. It's great.
Elton John.
What a
Very
rascal.
Little Sally-esque.
Yes. That's a great audition piece for a Little Sally audition that's not singing something from the show. A pointer from episode 3. Don't sing from the show. That was Paul Regano's first appearance on the Drama Club.
Guys, that was 10 episodes ago.
No.
A lifetime.
How young and naive we all were.
Oh,
This was but mere stubble.
the salad days of Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks. So number 7 on our list. This one will make Katie sad. From 2018, King Kong.
Sad, but not surprised.
Yes.
Guys, I just want to see it for the puppet. That's all I want out of my life.
The puppet is the reason to see it.
Yep, it is. Reviewed horribly. The technological feat of this giant puppet is amazing, and I think maybe the show would have done better if it didn't have 100 infamous breakdowns and malfunctions. Like, the puppet would often malfunction. If you have that many moving parts and that many moving people to operate something, it's gonna go down. The thing that Paul said earlier is what I am reminded of about King Kong the musical. It is something you never thought could be a musical, the musical. Why adapt this story? And is it just because they had an idea for a puppet?
I'm never going to say that anything can't be a musical. You can find a story and something that people will identify with in anything, I'm sure. I may not always be the guy to see that story. I might not be the guy to write it, but people thought that writing about poor Russian Jews in the shtetl wasn't a good idea.
They were wrong.
The Lower West Side of Manhattan was a bad idea.
They were wrong.
They still walked out of opening night of West Side Story. But the point is,
this is on that same thing real quick. Have you heard the White House performance where Lin-Manuel Miranda gets up and says, so I had this idea to write a musical about the first Treasury Secretary of the United States, Alexander Hamilton, and it gets a huge laugh? Same thing.
Yeah. So I think they definitely tried to find a story in it that was compelling. Whether or not the execution was right on the mark is debatable. What's so interesting to me is I sat in that theater going, well, and I really hate to talk badly about any fellow theater makers, because I applaud anyone who does this and goes for it. But I sat there going, I just don't think this is a very good musical. I am compelled to keep watching because, yes, that puppet is incredible. The stagecraft is incredible. There's a lot of great stuff happening on the stage. but the same guy who wrote the score wrote Beetlejuice, which did much better. And I've heard, I haven't seen Beetlejuice, but at this point I'm not going to, but I have heard a lot of the music, sorry, and I have heard a lot of the music, and it is such better musical theater writing than King Kong was, which just blows my mind. It feels like two different writers.
It's also two monster movies made into musicals at the same time, with lots of use of creative stagecraft and puppetry, like similar use of tone and palette, color, depth, and texture. Like we have very similar, like going all the way with those things. And one is yin and one is yang. Like, it's crazy. Number 8 on our list, 2017's Escape to Margaritaville.
I've never seen it. I've had a couple people who have seen it like on tour and stuff, and they said it was so much fun.
Yeah, it's just a jukebox musical. Yeah.
I had the opportunity and I didn't take it, and I do regret it a little bit, but I have seen pieces. I think it's one of those shows that really knows what it is.
Yeah.
People wrote it off as stupid, and they were like, yeah, it's stupid. Come have some stupid fun with us.
Right.
I don't think people got past that initial, this is stupid thing.
Yeah. And I think it was trying to capitalize on the Mamma Mia, this is dumb, love it anyway thing. But yeah. Mamma Mia's the ABBA music. Like, I don't know. There's the Jimmy Buffett idea. He's just so chill. His music tends to be quite chill. And toe tappers make you tap your toes. Like there's some like motion and dynamism implied with musical theater. Like you don't necessarily go to the theater to like chill,
right?
Flip, flop, pop, top.
Well, or do you? It
or
depends.
Do you?
Because in the early 2000s, when Broadway just came back after being closed for a week because of 9/11, that is what people wanted to do.
Yeah, that's true.
People wanted to tap their toes and feel good. But yeah. I think it says a lot about the state of art that, I mean, a lot of people, notably compared it to SpongeBob in that the plots are very similar. And yet SpongeBob had this energy about it. And SpongeBob, while it didn't last much longer than Escape to Margaritaville, still had a much more, it was far more legitimized. People took it much more seriously than Escape to Margaritaville. And that's a Nickelodeon kids show being adapted into a musical. So like, what's the formula for writing a Broadway hit?
Yeah, nobody knows. I think this last show on our list of the 9 biggest Broadway bombs I think there is a big reason for this one's failure, and I have an idea. I'm interested to hear what you guys think. This one is from 2011, and it's called Baby It's You. And this is a show that did not necessarily have a life outside of its initial Broadway run. It did run for 150 performances, which is a couple months. But this is a jukebox musical about the Shirelles. It's like a combo of Dreamgirls and Jersey Boys, which are they're both in the same genre. So it's like 2 different stories from the same genre. The music and the arrangements didn't necessarily work for the stage. Like if you think of, it's the same kind of genre and some of the same characters actually from Beautiful. And if you think of why Beautiful works, it's because the live performances of those songs are almost interstitials in the plot. So you have somebody doing something in the plot, in the main plot of the show, and then a dynamic, amazing version of a song that you already know comes forward and performs. And it's all part of the same interwoven storyline, but it's not didactic. What is that called when a song is part of the show? Like, come on, Betty, let's write a song. What's that called, Paul? Diegetic. So in Beautiful, they use non-diegesis quite often. And I think that is a smart way to deal with it. And in Jersey Boys, they do the exact opposite of that. Almost every single song in Jersey Boys has diegesis. So it's like there's not a magic combination that makes this work. But for Baby It's You, I don't know. I think there is something to be said also by female-driven narrative being less popular with people than male-driven narrative. So when you have something that's magical like Dreamgirls, which had never been seen before, is not a jukebox musical at all. When you try to repackage that idea with less teeth and give it the challenge of having a female-driven narrative, it's probably not going to make money.
I had completely forgotten it existed. I had to Google it when you said it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it ever had a cast recording.
I think you're onto something, Amber, though. Like the popularity of that music and like the story is female driven, and you don't see that often in the arts. Like,
Nope.
You just don't.
Yeah,
You really don't.
Being Too Proud was a Tony contender.
Yes. And it's the same idea, same period of time. But there is a nobility implied in a male-driven narrative that does not exist in the female-driven narrative. That is a table talk for another time. However, today we are talking about Broadway flops. So let's talk about 2016. And I know a lot of the things on our list, the surprising thing I think for a lot of our students is that the majority of our Broadway flops are pretty recent. And there's a reason for that, I think. Does anybody have any theories as to why the majority of our Broadway flops are happening pretty contemporaneously?
I would say that we just try to make so many things spectacles. And of course, that raises the pricing. Not to mention, prices are rising anyway. So whatever your investment is, you might make it back if the show actually works. But if you've got all these technical pieces that break down constantly, that interrupt your show flow, people don't want to come and see it anymore. And so they don't make that back.
Yeah. So 2016 had School of Rock, On Your Feet, a revival of Fiddler, The Color Purple, and all four of those were shows that were pretty well regarded, and you knew you were probably going to like them. If it was appealing to you, you probably knew you were going to like them. But this theater season is infamous for having 4 flops in the same season.
I saw School of Rock and Fiddler. Well, I saw School of Rock in London, loved it. One of the best shows I've ever seen. I saw the revival of Fiddler, and I did not like it at all. And Fiddler's one of my favorite shows. I didn't like a lot of the acting or the interpretation. I don't know, I just felt like, I don't know, I didn't love it.
That's crazy. I loved that Fiddler revival.
Really?
I haven't seen School of Rock. I mean, I'm not a huge Weber fan to begin with. Sorry, Sir Andrew.
He is one of our viewers. He actually gave us the question, what's your favorite unpopular show?
He was hoping that we were going to say Whistle Down the Wind. But yeah, I like polar opposite there, Molly. That's so funny.
No way. That's so funny. Yeah, and I'm trying to remember because it was so long ago that I saw it. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. I didn't like a lot of the vocalists. I thought they sounded vocally unhealthy. And for me, that when I see a show and to me it sounds like someone is like doing something wrong vocally, it really bothers me and I can't focus on the show because I'm thinking about how are they going to sustain this for 8 shows a week and they're going to get nodes and that could all just not be true too, because a lot of people just like have natural voices that sound different. But I don't know, maybe it was just personal preference. I remember not liking Tevye, the interpretation of Tevye. I didn't know this was such an unpopular opinion. I usually don't like to rock the boat.
She's been so quiet this whole episode because she's waiting to drop this bomb.
Was this the full Jewish cast that they did with Fiddler?
I think that was a different, more recent one.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
British Fiddler?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. But that wasn't that one that you guys are talking about right now. Oh, okay.
No, that opened in 2018, 19.
Yeah, my friend's sister, my friend that was in my musical theater program, I think her sister was in it, and I think she played Fru Masera. I don't know her name off the top of my head, but in the Yiddish one she was in.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
That is fascinating.
I also think
Oh, go
Go
ahead,
on.
Paul. No.
That wasn't important. Go on.
I was going to steer us back into the topic, and I'm always fascinated by what you have to say. So, the 4 shows in this season that failed to meet their initial investment are American Psycho, Disaster,
I love Disaster. Oh,
Tuck Everlasting, and Bright Star. So those 4 shows were up against some pretty spectacular and stiff competition. And as we've said previously in this episode, gore musicals have a challenge. And I've heard a story about American Psycho that like there were multiple occasions where blood packs malfunctioned and blood hit people in the audience. And not everybody's Katie is excited, but not
I was
everybody.
like, why wasn't I there?
There was a splash zone, yeah.
Yeah, there's not everybody is in it to win it that way. Like if you're in Dress Circle, if you purchase Dress Circle seats for a Broadway musical and have spent however many hundreds of dollars that implies, that is what outfit you're wearing, getting blood-stained.
Time to go back to where the poor people are in the front of the theater then, I guess.
Exactly.
I'm ready to sacrifice, guys.
Groundlings. So American Psycho had 27 preview performances. That's it. 27. And then it ran for 54 performances. So its run did exceed its previews, which is good.
It had also already run in London.
Yes.
So I think they were probably trying to save a little money
Mm-hmm.
and just like hit the ground running.
Yeah, the Broadway show by itself cost $8.8 million.
Relatively cheap for a
Absolutely.
which sounds ridiculous. My friend was in the pit, which they were put up in the boxes, some of them. So I was actually sitting near him, and at intermission I went to go talk to him, and his position did not exist in London. There were
Wow.
different union rules that allowed them to do it with like just I think like one live musician and a DJ, and I think it was more like an EDM dance party, which is what that show kind of requires. And I don't think they treated it as much like a musical as it was a play with music. And I think that if I had seen that show, I would have been much more into it. I think that Benjamin What's-His-Face, who played the Christian Bale role that I'm blanking on now, is unbelievably talented. There were a ton of beautiful bodies on that stage, and they definitely showed them off. I mean, it was about the yuppies and the beautiful excess of the 80s. Alice Ripley, they put Alice Ripley in it and then used her for all of 10 minutes. Which was
it's Duncan Sheik too.
Yeah. Who
should be
if our viewers wrote
Spring Awakening.
Spring Awakening, and also the Alice by Heart, is that the name of the one the
yeah, I think that's right.
There was a lot about it that should have worked, and I think it suffered a little bit from Carrie and Dr. Zhivago syndrome of American Psycho the musical.
I think also this might have been the wrong time for this show. There were a lot of people, and this didn't really come from critics, but a lot of individuals who saw the show. Some of the feedback was that this wasn't necessarily the right time for a misogynistic narrative. And you don't glorify the lead character necessarily, but he is a dynamic and charismatic and entertaining character who is a misogynist and a murderer. So what?
A sociopath.
And a sociopath, the usual. So for a lot of people, this was not the right time for that narrative to be sort of like uplifted. I also think it's really difficult in a musical because the musical genre is you're committing to a lot of like limitations when you do a musical. It's really hard to do a musical satire. Urinetown does satire very well.
Oh, wow.
Very well. But it's hard to pull off. And I think with American Psycho being satirical, but not in the humorous way, like it is a satire of the excessive American life of the 80s to have, like, it's very hard to pull that off. It's easier to do it when it's funny, but it's hard to pull off anyway. I think the film did it brilliantly, though divisively. But yeah, there's a lot of reasons I think that this failed.
It also, satire has a time and a place. It exists when it exists. And when given too much perspective, I think it's hard to acknowledge the satirical aspect of it. Bye Bye Birdie was a satire when it was written.
Yes.
How to Succeed in Business was a satire when it was written. I mean, it still has satirical elements about it. Both of them do, but it's harder to see that because it's not 1960s or whatever anymore.
Yeah.
And in Psycho, it's not the 80s anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next show on this list is Bright Star. Bright Star had 30 previews on Broadway and 109 performances. And this, I think one of the things that's hard about this show is that it is an original story. So you don't have that, oh, I know that title. Oh, I know that, like, oh, this is something familiar to me. This is whatever. The thing that is familiar to you in this is Edie Brickell and Steve Martin, who are the writing team behind this show. So that's why you would go see it. But just knowing it's Bright Star, you're not like, oh, Bright Star, the story of whatever. And it's not a simple story. So having people engage with that narrative, I think, is tough. And like a couple of shows on this list, Bright Star is also a rural narrative-ish. So, yeah, set in North Carolina, right? One of the Carolinas.
I think so.
So what do you think? What do you think, Paul? Why do you think this one ultimately tanked?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I agree with you. I took a class in college that focused on the economics of theater and producing theater. And one of the things that we talked a lot about is something has to make your show sexy. Doesn't matter whether it's the writing team or a big star, or literally it's, you know, in the case of American Psycho, a lot of what made it sexy was the sex. It was, you know, very, very sexual in nature. And what, you know, the star, quote unquote, was Steve Martin.
Yeah.
And you didn't get a lot of, and it wasn't Wild and Crazy Guy. It wasn't Father of the Bride. So I think a lot of people were missing that.
He even did the overture and a little bit of playing. Like, he would show up occasionally.
Yeah.
Just to try to, like, get people to buy tickets. They invested $10.5 million in that show, and it did not recoup its investment.
I do really love that show. One of our most successful alums from Western was the original Margot, Hannah Ellis. So yeah, she's pretty cool.
I just think it's got beautiful music in it.
Yeah.
I agree.
I
Well,
like
it ran in San Diego it was at Old Globe in San Diego for how long? Like almost a year, 2 years.
Well, yeah.
And it ran at the Kennedy Center and did really well. Like, there is no reason that it should not have hit. But yeah, it was mixed reviews. What was the one for the New York Times? I have it written down here. It's gentle spirited, not gaudy. That's what they said.
It was I mean, maybe this worked to its disadvantage, but it was in the Schubert, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. A beautiful historic theater. It's right in Schubert Alley. You know, it's right there. You know, you're not gonna miss it. It's not like Kinky Boots where you have to almost walk into the water to go find the theater. And maybe the simplicity and the coziness of the project didn't match that. There's a disconnect there. I don't
And
know.
also the other shows running on Broadway at the time. Like, how can you, when you're choosing between Bright Star and On Your Feet, like, how do you make that choice, you know? And this is the show where additional money was lent in. Steve Martin himself literally kept paying the actors' salaries so that the show could continue to run as long as it did.
Yeah. No, I was going to say something. Now it's gone.
Sorry.
No, it's good. It's good.
Where are we now on our list? Oh, yes, the third show on our list.
One other thing, sorry about that.
Yeah, no.
Just talking about like in comparison, the following year, that was the 2015-16 season, right?
Mhm.
16-17, that was the year that Hamilton won. Hamilton was already a big deal at the public at this point.
Yes.
So in general, we were looking at a lot of epics, a lot of like big, like really cool storytelling. And yeah, sorry, that juxtaposition, I think Bright Star was really alone in the we're just gonna sit you down and tell you a beautiful little story here kind of show.
Yeah. There's one other, but it also flopped.
That's true.
So 3 on our list is Disaster, ran for 32 previews and 72 performances. It is insane to me that in 2016 there are 4 of these shows. It's just a spoof of disaster films, and in particular one disaster film that I've never seen.
I forget what it is. I've been in the show twice. It's so brilliant. Played the same role both times. Tracy the waitress, super small role. I tried to make her as crazy as possible, but I think that, sorry, and I feel like I just cut you off too.
No, do it. I love you.
I love you too. I think that show, the setting of it should be regional theater. For some reason, I think that in a smaller house, the jokes land more. You can do more with the jokes. It's more intimate that way, and people get it. And I just think that that's the setting of that show, because when we did it at the barn, it was so successful. My first summer there, our ticket sales, that we opened with it the next year. And it was, I think, one of, like, I've never laughed harder in a show. Our director was great. I think just having a great director in general is great for that show. Seth Rudetsky is hilarious, and the writing is brilliant. And I just don't know if it really would have landed on a Broadway stage with that kind of audience. I don't know.
It didn't.
Yeah.
But it made it to Broadway because it did so well off Broadway, which is, I agree with you, Molly. I think that is a great venue for it. Regional theaters off Broadway. I think it's also a very specific market that they're marketing to. It's a 70s nostalgia thing. It's, cashing in on the people who like grew up and came of age to the hustle and that kind of stuff. And that's, really specific and not small, not to be written off, but very targeted.
Think about this. Initial investment in Bright Star, a albeit beautiful but small story, is $10.5 million. Disaster is a spectacular show with multiple odd and funny settings, including like floating on water amongst sharks, including like casino sets. Like, these are glitzy, bright sets. The Disaster initial investment was $6.5 million. Bright Star was $10.5 million. That is a difference of more money than I will make in my life.
Yeah.
Crazy. It's crazy to me.
I mean, it wasn't huge names, but for Broadway, it was an all-star cast.
Yeah.
Not cheap either.
Yeah, because it was Roger Bart, Carrie Butler, Adam Pascal was in that one.
At level, right? Jen Simard.
Faith Prince.
Yeah, huge. Yeah.
Yeah. So reasons it failed, people surmise that like on the Broadway stage, it felt like a skit.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I didn't see it, but if I saw it, I think I would agree.
And it didn't have enough what they call tourism star power. That was one of the other criticisms that I've read, that like when someone's coming in from Philadelphia into the train station and they're like, I'm going to go see a Broadway show, if they see the name Seth Rudetsky, they're not going to know what that means. It may catch them in the ear in a familiar way, but they're not going to be like, oh my God, I saw him on this TV show or in this movie. So yeah, I think it's a lot of those things, but it was a lot of Broadway star power. That's the thing. Like, it's amazing to me that people don't know who Faith Prince is. Like,
crying shame.
It is. It's ridiculous. And she's also done so much television that I don't understand. I'm sorry. I'm on my Faith Prince soapbox. If I am anything, I'm a combination of like Faith Prince and that lady who played the baker in Into the Woods.
Joanna Gleason.
I'm like a Faith Prince, Joanna Gleason hybrid. but just like a little worse.
Hard to disagree on that last point.
And like more awkward. Like, so fourth on our list. Speaking of a little worse, it's Tuck Everlasting. It's just
This one makes me sad.
I know. It had 28 previews, 39 performances.
Yeah, I actually know one half of the writing partnership, Nathan Tyson. He's a MSU alumni, and I've met him over time through alumni events, and he's just such a nice human. And I remember when they were trying to get to Broadway when I was still in college, and I met him, I guess, probably sophomore year, and Kyle Dean Massey, did I get that right? Kyle Dean. He sang Top of the World at our alumni event that year. And from then on, I was like hooked. I was like, oh, that's great. And then Nathan came and did a workshop at our school, and he sang it for us. And I was like, yes. And then the rest of the music is amazing. I use it in my camps all the time. And I was so excited for them when they finally reached their goal and got to Broadway. And then we all just mourned the day we got the news that they were going to close.
After 3 months.
Yeah, they had worked so hard. It had been such a long journey because they had a lot of stop and goes before they got there, a lot. And they finally gotten there, and then just devastating.
That is.
If you were going to guess on the initial investment for this show.
Oh God, I don't even know.
I would say between.
More than Bright Star?
I'm not going to answer that question. Yeah.
I would say like between 10 and 15.
You are right, Katie. It is between 10 and 15.
Good for me.
I said between 12 and 15.
It is not. It's 11 million. $11 million. And it ran for 39 performances. How many tickets would one have to sell to recoup $11 million in 39 performances?
At full price, no less.
Yeah, exactly. No TKTS here.
Yeah, it's funny, Katie, that you knew Nathan, because I actually knew Chris Miller.
I was going to say, do you know Chris?
When you said I know half the writing team, I was like, oh, which half? I used to walk Chris Miller's dog.
Aww.
A young 20-something starting out. And one day, his partner came to pick up his dog, Stella. And I was like, hey, so I was just looking at previous Larson Award grant winners because I'm a musical theater writer, and your husband is Chris Miller, and he was like, yeah, he doesn't like to talk about it.
I like it that you put your newsboy voice on when you're like, I'm talking to one of my mentors.
Shine your shoes, yeah.
Oh, so there are some theories as to why Tuck Everlasting failed, even though it's a dynamic, like an incredible cast. Terrence Mann, hello, thank you. Amazing. But also great design, incredible technically, took a simple story and made it spectacular. There are some theories as to why the show failed. One, having a child protagonist makes adults feel like it's a children's story. And two, if you are a family going to a family-friendly musical, how many Disney shows were running at the same time as Tuck?
A lot.
Yeah. Those are the theories.
That makes so much sense, because I honestly, I was, the whole time that I was sitting there watching the Broadway grosses, and I'm like, how is Tuck Everlasting not, like, I get it. It's an original show, which always, not original as in it hasn't been adapted, but like it's a new, relatively unknown writing team, and it's whenever there's something that it's like truly, that I feel it's like, this is like a real Broadway story. I mean, you had people who are musical theater writers and love Broadway, make, the producers are Broadway people. We did this very much in-house, one might say, that it's very, the people that I love and trust, and they're all coming together on something. The Prom. And then it doesn't do very well, So I kind of came to expect it, but I was hoping that Tuck Everlasting had the name recognition to break that trend. But you raised some brilliant, very salient points there.
Thank you. most of these shows, even the failures, or especially the failures, generally achieve a second life in regional theater and in other small, like upper Lort theaters. Because a lot of these shows are kind of designed for that. And it is unfortunately two different markets now. It's like the difference between like you're going to see something incredibly spectacular on Broadway, and that's the expectation, but you're going to have an experience of live theater and live performance that's more intimate when you go to a regional theater, and you have those expectations going into those places. So I think that it's interesting that Tuck Everlasting in particular, I wonder if it has recouped its initial investment at this point because of sales of music plus rights plus other productions. And it's not an easy show to produce by any means, but it is a spectacular regional theater show. And yeah, there's so much of this. Like, I don't think King Kong is producible by a regional theater unless it's like in the very small scale.
Agreed.
You know, like I don't think it's doable. But these small intimate stories like Bright Star and Tuck Everlasting are made for the regional theater. And Disaster. American Psycho, not so much.
I think that kind of comes with like defining what success means to you. And we've talked about this before. This is something that I have had to go through. And why wouldn't writers have to go through that as well? Knowing your targeted honest audience, knowing where it's going to go well. You know, Broadway is not the end all be all. Honestly, you'll probably do better with your work if you can get it into regional because you'll have more outlets to have it performed. So like, I think it all comes down to what you define as your success story.
Yeah, even Disney understands the difference between what makes a good regional theater show and what makes a good Broadway musical, because Hunchback has not ever and may not ever open on Broadway. And it has had an incredible regional theater life. And they designed it that way. They designed it to create a collaboration opportunity between local choirs and regional theaters to have some art crossover. Like that was the reason that they went with the regional theater aesthetic. And I think that's brilliant.
It would be enormously expensive, almost prohibitively so, even for Disney,
Yes.
to put that show on Broadway.
Right. In the way that it would be expected that they would do it.
Yes. Yeah, it was never their intention. And I hear people all the time, how come Hunchback never made it to Broadway? It was never going to. Now they want it.
No. Like there would be
on Broadway, they'll put it there.
Yeah, there would be pressure, I think, for aerial effects. There would be pressure for Quasimodo swinging over the audience and all kinds of other silly stuff. And then how do you deal with the design elements that you need to have in that show in a realistic way? Like, do you want to tax an actor with that? Because the actor that plays Quasimodo in Hunchback is in and out of his characterization. Like, it's not required for him to stand with a particular posture for you to know that he is Quasimodo. And they don't overly use prosthetics. There's not like a large amount of prostheses or like hunches or things. They're not doing it in a realism way. At La Jolla, didn't they smear his face with dirt and like tie a burlap sack onto him just to represent it? It was representational, not literal.
Very Peter and the Starcatcher.
Yeah.
Yes, another amazing show. That's not great for Broadway necessarily, but really good in an intimate venue.
It's okay on Broadway though.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
transfer to world stages, because again, started off Broadway, got some name recognition by going to Broadway, lived at New World Stages for a while. Has it even closed? I don't even know.
I don't think so.
Off Broadway at New World Stages, and like the third most produced straight play in schools right now.
Yeah. Also, like there's quite a few shows that have done the Broadway thing to do the Broadway thing and then moved off Broadway. Like Avenue Q had a huge second life off Broadway, and that's probably where that show belonged anyway. But there's many shows like that too. It's all about knowing the venue. So when we talk about these Broadway flops, it doesn't mean that the shows aren't any good. It means that there was an investment made of money and that the thing failed to recoup its investment. I think it'd be fun to look up, and maybe this is something that we do for the next episode, but the most profitable musicals that have ever been on Broadway, like for their initial investment, have recouped more than their initial investment by a certain amount. Maybe I'll look that up, maybe.
I think also how quickly it is recouped is something to think about
Yes.
when you look at profit, because I think we've already spoken. I think we talked about it last week about Six the musical, which
Yes.
I think their opening night was supposed to be a week after, or it was a week before or something. The shutdown happened,
Hmm.
and they were like really close to recouping already because it's six actors and a few musicians, and the set is just a concert scaffolding.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it came from regional, came from the West End. Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's something to be said. Like the movies that are the most profitable movies ever made are all horror movies because it's easy to make a horror movie. You can imply that a faucet was turned on by a ghost just by having your protagonist walk down the stairs in the middle of the night and a faucet's on, and that's terrifying. And like that's not good in any other kind of movie. You can't have a faucet turn on and it's romantic, but it can be scary. That was a weird analogy. I apologize. You have to have one. You have to have one weird analogy from Amber per episode, at least. And the one about foster parents is just the tip of the iceberg.
It's just a misunderstanding.
It was.
Misunderstanding.
As usual. So, what do we think about next week? Episode 14 of Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks. Oh, there's no ideas. The sound of
I don't hate
silence.
the idea of doing the most profitable. I don't hate that. Mostly because I just enjoy listening to you and Paul educate me. So we can do theater history all we want, guys. Teach me all the things.
I'm sitting here going like, I'm talking way too much. I
feel the same way all the time.
I have nothing to add. Please fill the space.
Before we move on to the most profitable, I will say honorable mention. Just I'm amazed that we have not even talked about the legendary Flop creator, who you might not think in a modern context, but in his time, Steve Sondheim. Everybody loves me, but nobody will produce me blues. You know,
Yep.
Anyone Can Whistle ran for 9 performances.
Yeah, terrible. Terrible.
Long ran for 16 or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, he was on his own. He couldn't produce a hit, but everything that he produced with someone else was a wild success. Like Gypsy.
Also, like all of a sudden in the, early 2000s to present, everyone's like, yes, the man is a genius. He is the grandmaster. And all of a sudden everything is getting produced. People are looking at his musical and saying so brilliant. Whereas in the 60s and 70s, he was writing and they were saying, you can't sing that. It doesn't stick with me. So how could it be a musical?
Yeah.
Very funny to me. Anyway.
I think there's also like that thing that you said that was his comment. I met him in St. Louis in 1999 because he was the keynote speaker at the Jewish Book Festival because his biography came out that year. And he talked at length about how much he regrets particular things. And the first question the interviewer asked was this, literally. He starts the interview with, de Maupassant's candor once caused her dismay. The Brontes are grander, but not very gay. Her taste is much blander, I'm sorry to say. But is Hans Christian Andersen ever risque? And exactly. And Sondheim said, oh, I hate that lyric. It's so brilliant. And it is considered one of the most brilliant lyrics in musical theater because in context it works. Every single syllable is an internal rhyme. It is a masterwork of 4 lines. And it's about a man who is trying to decide how he can best charm his new wife. And he's thinking about reading these books. So all of those things are all like ways that he could charm her. And all of these authors, he's naming all these authors and like what they would be like and why they wouldn't work. And it's all this internal rhyme and it's genius. It's brilliant. But on first hearing, you cannot go, yes, I see. That's 4 lines of internal rhyme, all about different authors and their genres, and why those authors' genres would not be charming to a young lady. Like, you can't do it. So he breaks his own rule, and I think the rules that we know the best are the ones that we fail at the most. So Yeah, there's a lot of that in early Sondheim, though. You know that it's good. You know that what he's writing is brilliant. But do you go see Sunday in the Park with George on a Friday night for a good time? We do. But like the general audience, are they going to be like, oh, yes, the elements of design as a song? Like, are they going to be happy? Chromolium number 7. Like, is that...
Well, I thought it would be a series of 3, 4 at the most.
Yeah, the gestalt of all of it. Yeah, I think it's a little dense, and there's something to be said for that. But just because something is not profitable does not mean it isn't brilliant. Because look at this. Brilliant, but not extremely profitable. So that wraps up episode 13. The episode of disasters, the Broadway disasters. Next week's topic, TBD. We're gonna chat about it. We'll let you guys know what we're gonna cover in episode 14. It has been a blast. This has been great. Sorry I talk so much.
Same here.
But we will see you guys next week. As always, a special thanks goes out to Goshen Noon Kiwanis for their support of Goshen Theater Drama Club. And we love your questions. We love your suggestions. Please send those on. If you're lucky, maybe you'll inspire an episode of Table Talks, or we will answer your question right here. There's plenty to say about Broadway disasters. So yeah, drop those in the comments here on YouTube or on the Facebook posts that you're seeing this on likely. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.